Okay, so have you ever like walked out of a negotiation and been like, "Whoa, what just happened?" Like, did I just get totally played? I swear it happened to me last week at the farmer's market. I went in just for some simple tomatoes, right? And I walked out with like a dozen heirloom eggplants and this giant pumpkin I have absolutely no idea what to do with. This sweet little old lady somehow convinced me I needed all this stuff for like a fall themed dinner party, which I'm definitely not having. It's funny, but it also kind of got me thinking, are there like actual techniques these master persuaders are using? Like some secret code to influence our decisions? Well, today we're going to deep dive into this fascinating source. And it claims to unlock the mysteries of persuasion, mind control, even covert hypnosis. Now, don't worry, we're not advocating for any manipulative tactics here. This is about understanding the psychology behind influence. And you know how it might be operating under our noses. So this source really emphasizes the power of the subconscious mind. You know that part of our brain that's like working behind the scenes, processing information and influencing our thoughts and behaviors without us even realizing it. Like, think about those times you're driving somewhere familiar and your mind just totally wanders. You arrive at your destination safe and sound, but you can barely remember the actual drive. That's your subconscious taking the wheel right. And get this, the book argues that this subconscious can be influenced by all sorts of subtle cues and messages, like those repetitive visuals you see in advertising. Remember those old AT&T commercials? With the maps and the strong signal bars everywhere, they weren't just conveying information about network coverage. They were tapping into our subconscious desire for connection and reliability. Pretty sneaky, right? So if you really want to crack the code of persuasion, this source says you need to tap into something even deeper. Basic human instincts. They lay out 7 key desires that drive our decisions. Survival, security, stability, reproduction. There's a whole other can of worms in terms of how it's used in advertising. Family, the desire for power and authority, independence and saving. Okay, so let's take a closer look at the desire for saving. The source makes a really interesting distinction between savers and spenders. Savers are all about long-term value security, getting the most bang for their buck. Spenders, on the other hand, are more impulsive, driven by instant gratification. And you know the experience of acquiring new things. Understanding these core motivations can be huge in figuring out how to tailor your message to resonate with different people. And speaking of tailoring your message, this source goes deep into the art of body language. Apparently, it's not just about what you say, but how you say it. Our nonverbal cues can be super powerful, especially when it comes to like establishing dominance and control. They even go so far as to distinguish between what they call alpha A versus beta body language. For example, did you know that strong eye contact, and I don't mean like creepy staring, but confident engagement can convey a sense of authority. It's about looking ahead, not down at your feet, like you've got somewhere to be. And it's not just the eyes. Apparently, the speed at which you talk can also influence how you're perceived. Too fast, you might seem nervous or unsure. Too slow, and you might come across as boring or unintelligent. It's all about finding that sweet spot right. Posture is another big one. Open leg positions for men supposedly project confidence, while women project that same confidence by keeping those legs close together, back straight, shoulders back. And for everyone, the key takeaway is to avoid fidgeting. Channel your inner Zen master and project an aura of controlled calmness. Now, persuasion isn't always about dominance and control, right? Sometimes it's about creating a sense of connection and building what this source calls instant rapport. It's that feeling you get when you meet someone and you just click, like you're on the same wavelength. So how do you build this instant rapport? Well, the book emphasizes the importance of active listening. It's not just about waiting your turn to speak. It's about genuinely trying to understand the other person's perspective, their thoughts, their feelings. It's about showing empathy and building that trust. But there are also some, shall we say, more strategic techniques you can use, like mirroring body language and speech patterns, subtly aligning yourself with the other person to create a sense of subconscious harmony, or finding common ground, like shared experiences or interests. That feeling of we're in this together can be super powerful. And then there's this kind of controversial tactic. called the common enemy strategy. I got to be careful with this one, so you don't create unnecessary conflicts, right? But the idea is that aligning yourself with someone against a shared obstacle can actually bring you closer together. Oh, and here's a little pro tip from the book. Leave conversations on an open end. It's about keeping the other person engaged, thinking about you, even after the conversation is over. Like planting a seed of intrigue that just keeps growing. But if you really want to take your persuasion skills to the next level, the source suggests mastering the art of speech engineering. Now, it's not about manipulation. It's about crafting your language in a way that resonates with the listener, understanding the subtle power of words and how they can influence decisions. For example, they highlight the importance of using the other person's name frequently. It creates a sense of personalization, like you're really paying attention to them. And then there's the surprisingly persuasive power of the word because. Yeah, even the reason you give isn't all that strong. The mere pressing it of that word can trigger a subconscious sense of compliance. It's like a mental shortcut for, okay, this makes sense. Now, this is where things get a little bit mind-bendy. The source dives into the concept of hidden commands, which are basically little nuggets of suggestion nestled within seemingly harmless phrases. Like, let's say you're trying to convince your friend to try a new restaurant. Instead of just saying, hey, let's go to this new place, you might say, have you ever considered trying that new Italian restaurant everyone's been raving about? So, see what I did there? I'm not forcing the issue. I'm just planting a seed of suggestion in their mind. Or imagine you're in a sales meeting and you want to emphasize the urgency of a deal. Instead of directly saying you need to act now, you might say, you may not realize how quickly this opportunity is going to disappear. Again, it's a subtle approach. But the book argues that it can be surprisingly effective. And this is a big book, we got to use these techniques ethically. Persuasion is about influence, not coercion. We're not trying to trick people into doing things they don't want to do. Now, some of this stuff might seem a little, matrix. Why? But the truth is we're bombarded with persuasive messages every single day, from advertising to social media to even those seemingly harmless conversations with friends and family. So the more we understand how these secret codes work, the better equipped we are to navigate this complex world of influence. Are we the persuader or are we being persuaded? That's a question worth pondering when you say. All right, so this next part is where things get really wild. The source dives headfirst into this whole concept of covert hypnosis, which is basically like planting suggestions in someone's subconscious without them even knowing it's happening. Sounds kind of like something out of the spy movie, right? Now, I'm no hypnosis expert, but the way the book explains it, covert hypnosis is all about bypassing those conscious filters and speaking directly to that deeper, more suggestible part of the mind. It's like using language as a secret key to unlock hidden desires and influence behavior. So how does this actually work in real life? Let's say you're trying to convince your friend, let's call him Mark, to join you for a weekend camping trip. Now, Mark, he's a bit of a homebody, loves his creature comforts, not really the outdoorsy type. Now, before I read this source, I might have just said something like, come on, Mark, it'll be fun. We can roast marshmallows, tell ghost stories, the whole camping experience. But now, armed with this covert hypnosis knowledge, I take a different approach. Instead of direct ask, I might casually drop in some of these hidden commands. Like while chatting with Mark, I might say something like, have you ever noticed how much more peaceful you feel after spending time in nature? Or, you may not realize how much you need a break from all that screen time. The key here is subtlety. I'm not forcing the issue. I'm just planting a seed of suggestion, letting it percolate in Mark's subconscious. The book argues that this can be super effective because, unlike our conscious mind, the subconscious doesn't analyze or question information as much. It just kind of absorbs it. Now, before you go around hypnotizing all your friends, let's talk ethics for a sec. This stuff is powerful, and like any tool, it can be used for good or, not so good. The source emphasizes that covert hypnosis should never be about manipulation. It's about influence. It's about guiding someone towards a decision that's already aligned with your own values and desires. Okay, let's get practical. The source outlines some specific techniques for using covert hypnosis in everyday life. One of the simplest ones is incorporating what they call supportive words. These are phrases that kind of cushion the hidden command, making it more palatable to the conscious mind. Think of it like this. Imagine you're trying to convince your kid to eat their broccoli. Now, if you just say, eat your broccoli, chances are you're going to get some resistance, right? But if you use a supportive word like, I'm not saying you have to eat all your broccoli, just maybe try a little bite. You're giving them a sense of autonomy, while still subtly suggesting the desired outcome. There are tons of these supportive words you can use. Have you ever considered? You may not know. I wonder if. The key is to choose phrases that feel natural to you and your conversational style. Another powerful technique the source highlights is using metaphors and stories. You know our brains are wired for storytelling.
We connect with narratives on a deep emotional level. And covert hypnosis taps into this. Instead of directly stating your point, you can weave it into a compelling story or analogy. It's like sneaking in the back door of the subconscious, while the conscious mind is captivated by the entertainment. For example, let's say you're trying to motivate your team to embrace a new challenge at work. Instead of just listing the benefits, you could tell a story about a company that faced similar obstacles and achieved incredible success by embracing change. The imagery and emotional connection of the story can be way more persuasive than a dry, logical presentation. Now, here's a technique that I found particularly fascinating. The source calls it spatial anchoring, and it's basically about linking specific emotions or ideas to physical objects or locations. It's kind of like creating a mental map where certain spots represent certain feelings. For example, let's say you're having a conversation with a client and you want to associate positive emotions with your product. Every time you mention a key benefit, you could subtly gesture towards a specific object in the room, like a beautiful piece of art or a plant. On a conscious level, they're just seeing you gesture, but subconsciously their mind might start connecting that object with those positive feelings. It's like embedding a subtle, persuasive trigger in their environment. The source suggests you can use this technique in all sorts of situations, from sales presentations to public speaking to even, just everyday conversations. It's about strategically directing attention and subtly influencing perception. Now, I know this might sound a bit overwhelming, but the key is to start small and experiment. Try incorporating some of these techniques into your conversations. See how they feel. Notice how people respond. It's amazing what a few subtle shifts in language and behavior can do. But always remember, with great power comes great responsibility. These techniques should always be used ethically, with the other person's best interests at heart. Okay, let's shift gears and talk about something a little less mind-bendy. Subliminal messaging. It's this whole idea of planting hidden messages in ads or media to influence behavior. Like that classic urban legend about flashing images of popcorn during a movie to boost concession sales. Whether it actually works is debatable. But the point is, we're constantly being exposed to subtle, persuasive cues, often without even realizing it. The source mentions some interesting examples of how subliminal messaging is used in real life. Apparently, some stores play music with embedded messages like, "Don't steal, we're watching you," to deter shoplifting. Kind of creepy, but hey, if it works right. But it's not always so innocent. The source also talks about how subliminal messaging is often used for less than ethical purposes, like embedding hidden sexual imagery in ads to tap into those primal urges and influence consumer behavior. It's a reminder that persuasion is a powerful tool, and it's up to us to be aware of how it's being used, both for good and for, not so good. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, there's one more crucial aspect of persuasion we need to address: overcoming internal resistance. Think about it. We all have those inner voices that hold us back, right? The doubts, the fears, the what-ifs. That can prevent us from taking action. The source argues that there are two main ways to make your offer more convincing. You can either make it more enticing, which we've talked about a lot already, or you can work to reduce the other person's internal resistance. It's like clearing a path for them to say yes. One way to do this is by acknowledging and validating those negative emotions. It might seem counterintuitive, but the idea is to meet people where they are. Let them know you understand their concerns, their fears, their hesitations. So let's say you're trying to convince your boss to approve a risky new project. They might be hesitant, worried about the potential downsides. Instead of brushing those concerns aside, you can say something like, I understand your hesitation. Any new venture comes with its share of uncertainties. By acknowledging their fears, you're not dismissing them. You're creating space for them to feel heard and understood. And once you've validated those negative emotions, you can start reframing them in a more positive light. It's about shifting the focus from what if it goes wrong to what if it goes right. So you might follow up by saying something like, but imagine the potential rewards if this project succeeds. Think about the growth opportunities, the positive impact it could have on the company. You're not denying the risks. You're simply shifting the perspective to highlight the potential upside. Now, another powerful technique for overcoming internal resistance is what the source calls the multiple options strategy. Instead of presenting someone with a simple yes or no choice, you offer them two options that both lead to the desired outcome. For example, imagine you're trying to get your friend to go to a concert with you. Instead of asking, do you want to go? A key. You might say, would you rather sit in the front row or a bit further back? Either way, they're going to the concert. But you've given them a sense of control by letting them choose between two appealing options. And finally, there's this bold technique called the inevitable approval strategy. It's all about confidence, acting as if their approval is a foregone conclusion. So instead of asking a potential investor, would you be interested in funding this project? You might say, I know you're going to love this project. What level of investment are you most comfortable with? You're not giving them an opportunity to say no. You're assuming they're already on board. Now, obviously, you got to be careful with this one. You don't want to come across as pushy or presumptuous. But when used effectively, it can be a powerful way to bypass those internal resistance mechanisms and create momentum towards a positive decision. Okay, one last thing I wanted to touch on from this source. It really got me thinking about how differently people respond to persuasive tactics. It's like that old saying, different strokes for different folks, right? What works like a charm on one person might totally backfire on another. So understanding those individual differences can be huge. The book breaks down personality types into these three main categories: analyticals, amiables, and expressives. Now, the analyticals, these are the folks who thrive on logic, data, facts, figures, all that good stuff. They're not going to be swayed by some slick sales pitch or, an emotional appeal. They want to see the evidence, crunch the numbers, weigh the pros and cons. So when you're dealing with an analytical, you got to come prepared. Answer their questions, provide detailed info, back up your claims with solid evidence. Then you got the amiables. These are the people who prioritize relationships and harmony. They want to feel comfortable, build trust, know that you genuinely have their best interests at heart. They're not going to be rushed into a decision. So patience is key. With amiables, it's all about building that rapport, creating a sense of connection, and showing that you genuinely care about their needs. And then there's the expressives. Think big picture thinkers, driven by passion and enthusiasm, always bursting with ideas. They love to talk, share their thoughts, get excited about new possibilities. So with expressives, you got to paint a vivid vision, inspire them with your ideas, get them fired up about the possibilities. Of course, these are just broad categories. In real life, people are way more complex, right? But understanding these basic personality types can give you a starting point, help you tailor your approach and connect with people on a deeper level. And get this, the source suggests, you can actually use the way someone speaks to pick up on clues about their personality type, kind of like a little window into their subconscious. Analyticals, they tend to be very precise with their language, careful with their words, might even speak a little slower, taking their time to think things through. Amiables, on the other hand, often use warmer, more relational language. They might ask more questions, focus on shared experiences, things like that. And then you got the expressives, probably talking a mile a minute, using lots of colorful language, maybe even gesturing wildly as they speak. It's fascinating, right? The way we communicate reveals so much about how we process information.
make decisions, and interact with the world around us. So wow, we've really gone deep on this deep dive today. We explored the power of the subconscious, those core human desires that drive our actions, the subtle language of body language, the art of building rapport, the mind-bending world of covert hypnosis, even the sneaky influence of subliminal messaging. It's a lot to take in, but I hope you found it as fascinating as I did. The key takeaway here is that persuasion is not about manipulating people. It's about understanding the psychology of influence, becoming better communicators, connecting with people on a deeper level. It's about using these secret codes responsibly, ethically, always with the other person's best interest at heart. So the next time you find yourself trying to convince someone of something, whether it's pitching a new idea at work, getting your kids to tidy up their rooms, or even just persuading your friends to try that new restaurant you've been raving about, think about these techniques. Experiment, observe, refine your approach, and hey, who knows, maybe you'll unlock your inner master persuader. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious.